The morning sun over the Bronx was unforgiving, a pale gold that did nothing to warm the chill in Maria's bones. Her small studio apartment, nestled above a bodega that smelled perpetually of fried plantains and diesel fumes, held the cold of the night within its thin walls. She stood at the single window, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of café con leche, watching the city yawn itself awake. Below, the Ford train rattled by, a thunderous reminder of the relentless pace of a life she was struggling to join. 5 months. It had been 5 months since she'd left Santiago de los Caballeros, trading the familiar embrace of the Dominican mountains for this concrete labyrinth. Her fingers, calloused from a lifetime of work, now felt useless. She was a nurse back home, a respected one, but here her credentials were just pieces of paper, trapped in a maze of bureaucracy and red tape. "Paciencia, Maria," she whispered to herself, the words a fragile mantra. The reflection in the window showed a woman of 45 with eyes that held too much storm for one person. Her uniform, a stark, polyester blue for a home health aid agency, felt like a costume. It was honest work, tending to Mr. Henderson, a kind old man with a fading memory, but it was not her work. It was a shadow of the calling she missed, the dignity of her stethoscope, and her ability to truly heal. The fear was a constant companion, a tightness in her chest that whispered she would never be more than the invisible help, a ghost in someone else's life. She finished her coffee, the bitter liquid a small comfort. On the rickety kitchen table, next to a photo of her daughter, Sophia, smiling in her university gown, lay a pile of bills. They were like vultures, circling. The money she sent back home was a lifeline, but it left her own existence threadbare. She touched the photo, her thumb tracing Sophia's face. This was why. Every lonely moment, every swallowed pride, was for that smile. A car alarm blared outside, shattering the quiet. Maria flinched, then squared her shoulders. She picked up her worn purse, filled with her aid supplies and a small personal first aid kit she always carried, a relic from her nursing days. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of home from the cafe and the scent of struggle from the street. Today was just another day. Another day of navigating a system that saw her as a number, of understanding a language that still sometimes felt like a wall, of smiling through the ache of being so far from everything she knew. She locked her door, the click of the bolt a sound of finality. She descended the narrow, dimly lit staircase, her steps heavy with a fatigue that sleep could not cure. But as her feet hit the pavement, a shift occurred. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and let the mask of resilience settle into place. The city was loud, brash, and indifferent. But Maria was not. She walked towards the subway, a solitary figure in a rushing crowd, her heart a tangled knot of fear and ferocious hope. She did not know it, but the universe was about to tilt on its axis. The weight of this new dawn was heavy, but it was a weight she had learned to carry. She moved through the crowd, a current of determination in a river of anonymity. Her story was one of millions in this city, yet today, it was on the verge of becoming singular. The bus ride to Mr. Henderson's was a lesson in patience, a lurching stop-start journey that gave her too much time to think. She watched the neighborhoods change outside the grimy window, each block a different world. She thought of the lush, green quiet of her mother's garden, the sound of roosters at dawn, the way the air smelled after a tropical rain. A sharp pang of homesickness hit her, so visceral it stole her breath for a moment. She closed her eyes, forcing the image away. This was her reality now. This bus, this uniform, this life. She got off a stop early, needing the walk to clear her head. The air was crisp, carrying the promise of autumn. It was on this walk, with her head down against the wind, that she heard it. A sound that cut through the city's cacophony and made her blood run cold. It was a scream of torque and terror, the agonizing screech of rubber desperately trying to grip asphalt, followed by the sickening, hollow crunch of fiberglass and metal colliding with an immovable force. Maria's head snapped up, her nurse's instincts firing before her mind could even process the scene. 50 yards ahead, at the chaotic intersection of Fordham Road and the Grand Concourse, a motorcycle was tangled around the rear fender of a yellow cab. The bike was on its side, front wheels still spinning with a dizzying, pointless whir. The cab driver was already out, his hands pulling at his hair, his mouth open in a silent scream of his own. And then she saw the rider. He was sprawled on the gritty pavement, a dark-haired man in a leather jacket, his body unnaturally still. A wave of pedestrians had frozen, a gallery of horrified onlookers, their phones already raised, capturing the tragedy but not moving to intervene. It was a tableau of modern urban life, all witness, no action. Maria didn't think. Her body moved, her purse bouncing against her hip as she broke into a run. Dios mío! She gasped, the words torn from her in her native tongue. The training from a lifetime ago from another country kicked in with a fierce, automatic clarity. She was no longer Maria the immigrant aide. She was Maria the nurse, the healer, the one who ran towards the crisis when others ran away. Call 911. Llama la ambulancia. She yelled to the crowd, her voice sharp with authority, her accent thick but her meaning unmistakable. She dropped to her knees beside the man, the cold of the pavement seeping through her uniform slacks. The smell of gasoline and hot oil filled her nostrils. He was young, maybe in his late 20s, his face pale and slick with a sheen of shock. A deep gash on his forehead bled profusely, tracing a crimson path through his dark stubble and onto the ground.
Sir?
Can you hear me? She said, leaning close. His eyelids fluttered. A low moan escaped his lips. Don't move. No se mueva, she instructed, her hands already moving, expert and gentle. She placed one hand on his shoulder to still him, while with the other, she rummaged in her purse for the small, zippered first aid kit. It was a simple thing, but it held gauze, antiseptic wipes and bandages. The cab driver hovered over her. I didn't see him. He came out of nowhere. He cried, his voice trembling. Maria didn't look up. Your jacket, please, she commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. The man, stunned, shucked off his jacket. She folded it and carefully slid it under the motorcyclist's head, elevating it slightly. With a clean gauze pad from her kit, she applied firm pressure to the wound on his forehead. Her fingers, stained with his blood, were steady. You are going to be okay, she murmured to the young man, her voice a soft, soothing counterpoint to the wail of the approaching sirens. Help is coming. Just look at me. Stay with me. His eyes, clouded with pain and confusion, focused on her face. He tried to speak, but only a ragged breath came out. Shoo, she soothed, her other hand checking the pulse in his wrist. It was rapid but strong. My leg, he managed to grit out. She glanced down. His left leg was bent at an angle that was not natural. A possible fracture. Don't try to move it, she said firmly. The ambulance is here. The red and blue lights painted the faces of the crowd in pulsating strokes. 2 EMTs rushed over with a gurney and a heavy medical bag. What do we have, ma'am? One of them asked, his eyes taking in the scene, the blood on her hands, the professional way she was managing the patient. Maria didn't miss a beat. Male, late 20s. Laceration to the forehead, controlled with direct pressure. Suspected closed fracture of the left femur. Pulse is tachycardic but strong. Responsive but disoriented. The EMTs looked at her, impressed. They quickly took over, applying a cervical collar, assessing the leg, preparing him for transport. As they shifted him onto the backboard, the young man's hand shot out and grabbed Maria's wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. His eyes, clear for a moment, locked with hers. Thank you, he breathed, the words full of a raw, unvarnished gratitude. Then, he was lifted onto the gurney and whisked into the ambulance. The doors slammed shut, and the vehicle pulled away, its siren fading into the hum of the city. Maria was left kneeling on the pavement, her hands stained with blood, the cab driver's jacket still under her knees. The crowd had begun to disperse, the spectacle over. She slowly stood, her legs trembling now that the adrenaline was receding. She looked at her watch. She was late for Mr. Henderson. She wiped her hands on a clean part of the gauze, her mind already shifting to the old man who would be waiting for his morning medication. The world had stopped for one man, but it was starting again for her. She picked up her purse, her movements slow, waited. She walked away from the intersection, The image of the young man's grateful eyes burned into her memory. It was just a moment, a fleeting act of humanity in a hard city. She had no way of knowing it was the first thread of a tapestry that was about to be woven, a thread that would pull her out of the shadows and into a light she had forgotten existed. The familiar scent of lemon-scented polish and faint medicinal ointment greeted Maria as she let herself into Mr. Henderson's apartment. The quiet was a stark contrast to the violent symphony of the intersection. "Mr. Henderson? It's Maria. I am so sorry I am late," she called out, her voice deliberately soft, pushing the morning's trauma down into a deep, locked place inside her. She found him in his armchair by the window, a biography of Winston Churchill open on his lap. He looked up, his blue eyes cloudy with age but kind. "No trouble at all, my dear. The city has its own schedule, doesn't it?" he said with a gentle smile. Maria's hands, now scrubbed clean in the bodega's bathroom, but still feeling the phantom stick of blood, trembled slightly as she prepared his pills. She went through the motions of her job with practiced efficiency, checking his blood pressure, tidying the small kitchen, preparing his lunch. But her mind was elsewhere. It was back on the pavement, feeling the cold seeping through her clothes, seeing the stark white of the bone, almost threatening to break through the skin of the young man's leg. She saw the faces of the crowd, their phones held aloft like digital shields, and felt a fresh wave of the isolation that had plagued her since her arrival. In that moment, she had been visible, necessary. Now, she was invisible again, the quiet woman who changed sheets and measured medication. "You seem quiet today, Maria," Mr. Henderson observed later, as she fluffed the pillows behind his back. "Is everything all right?" She forced a smile, a practiced, gentle curve of her lips. "Sí, Mr. Henderson. Everything is fine. Just a busy morning on the bus." She couldn't tell him. To speak of it would be to make it real, to acknowledge the fragility of the life she was building here. The incident was a crack in her carefully constructed wall of composure. It reminded her of the emergencies she used to handle in the Santiago hospital, the respect she commanded, the clear purpose of her days. Here, her purpose was to be quiet, to be efficient, to be unseen. The hours passed with a slow, dragging quality. When her shift ended, she walked back to her apartment, the autumn air feeling colder, more biting. She climbed the stairs, each step an effort. Inside her small studio, the silence was a physical presence. She looked at the photo of her daughter. "I helped someone today, Sophia," she whispered to the smiling image. "Like I used to." But the words felt hollow. The act of kindness hadn't filled the emptiness, it had merely highlighted it. It had shown her a reflection of the person she used to be, a reflection that was now fading. She made herself a simple dinner of rice and beans, the familiar flavors a small comfort. As she ate alone at the small table, she replayed the man's grip on her wrist, the intensity in his eyes. "Thank you," he had said. The words had been sincere, but what did they change? Her rent was still due. Her credentials were still stuck in limbo. She was still alone. She cleaned her small kitchen, the routine of it a meditation. Then, she took a long, hot shower, trying to wash away the lingering feeling of the pavement and the metallic scent of fear. As the water cascaded over her, she allowed herself to cry, silent tears that mixed with the spray. They were tears of frustration, of homesickness, of a professional pride that had been bruised and neglected. She was a healer in a city that didn't seem to need her healing. She went to bed early, the events of the day a chaotic loop behind her closed eyelids. She fell into a fitful sleep, haunted by the sound of screeching tires and the sight of a spinning motorcycle wheel. She did not dream of gratitude or reward. She dreamed of being lost in a crowd, calling out for her daughter, her voice swallowed by the noise of a city that did not know her name. The kindness she had offered felt like a single pebble dropped into a vast, dark ocean. There was a splash, a momentary ripple, and then, nothing. The deep, consuming silence of the water closing back over it. The night was long. The revelation of the next day was a dawn she could not yet imagine. The morning came, gray and damp. A fine misting rain fell over the Bronx, painting the streets in slick, shimmering shades of gray and black. Maria felt heavy, as if the rain had seeped into her bones overnight. The adrenaline of the previous day had vanished, leaving behind a profound weariness. The memory of the accident was a dull ache, a bruise on her spirit. Her shift at Mr. Henderson's didn't start until the afternoon, so she moved slowly through her small apartment, drinking her coffee, trying to find the energy for the day. The world outside her window seemed muted, the sounds of traffic and sirens softened by the rain. It was a day for staying inside, for quiet reflection, for hiding from the sharp edges of the city. She was just about to start sorting through the dreaded pile of bills on her table, when a sound cut through the quiet drumming of the rain. A knock. Firm. Insistent. It was not the casual tap of her neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, borrowing sugar. This was a knock that demanded an answer. Maria froze, her mug halfway to her lips. No one visited her here. The landlord used the mail slot. She had no friends who would drop by unannounced. A cold knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. Was it immigration? Had something happened with her paperwork? Was it bad news from home? Her mind, conditioned to expect trouble, raced through the worst scenarios. The knock came again, louder this time. Un momento. She called out, her voice slightly unsteady. She smoothed down her simple house dress and walked to the door, peering through the tiny, distorted peephole. The view was like looking through a fishbowl, but the image it presented made her breath catch in her throat. Standing on her narrow landing were two men. One was the young motorcyclist from the accident. He was on crutches, his left leg in a full, bulky cast from thigh to ankle. He looked pale, a neat line of stitches visible on his forehead, but his eyes were clear and intent. And standing beside him, his hand resting supportively on the young man's shoulder, was an older man, perhaps in his 60s, with a head of distinguished silver hair and an expensive, well-tailored overcoat that seemed out of place in her dim, shabby hallway. The older man's face was etched with a profound, serious gratitude. Maria's heart hammered against her ribs. This was not her official visit. This was something else entirely. With trembling fingers, she unbolted the lock, the chain, and the deadbolt, and slowly pulled the door open. The damp hallway air rushed in. For a long moment, no one spoke. The young man, leaning heavily on his crutches, was the first to break the silence. His voice was stronger than it had been on the pavement, filled with an emotion that seemed to overwhelm him. "You," he said, his eyes glistening. "I didn't know your name. The EMTs said you just disappeared. We had to find you." Maria could only stare, her hand still on the door. I am Maria," she managed to say. "Are you all right?" The young man let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Thanks to you. The doctor said the way you controlled the bleeding and stabilized me. You kept me from going into shock. You probably saved my leg." He gestured to the cast. "It's a bad break, but they say it'll heal perfectly." The older man stepped forward slightly. His eyes, a sharp, intelligent blue, scanned her face, taking in her simple dress, the humble apartment behind her, the expression of sheer bewilderment in her eyes. He extended his hand. "Ms. Maria," he said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone, calm and authoritative, yet softened with unmistakable emotion. "My name is Dr. Arthur Pendleton. This is my son Leo. Dr. Pendleton." The name meant nothing to her, but the title doctor sent a familiar, professional jolt through her. She took his hand. His grip was firm, warm. "Leo told me everything," Dr. Pendleton continued, his gaze unwavering. "How you ran to him when everyone else stood by. How you took charge with such incredible skill and compassion. He said you sounded like a doctor yourself." Maria's cheeks flushed. She looked down, suddenly ashamed of her surroundings, of her status. "I was a nurse," she said softly, almost inaudibly. "In the Dominican Republic." Dr. Pendleton's eyes widened slightly, a new layer of understanding dawning in them. He glanced past her, into the small, tidy room, at the single photo on the table, at the pile of bills. He saw the story written there in the sparse furnishings, and the proud posture of the woman in front of him. "A nurse," he repeated, his voice filled with a new kind of intensity. "Of course you were." Leo shifted on his crutches, wincing slightly. "We asked the cab driver, we checked with local businesses. It took us all yesterday afternoon and this morning, but we found your building. The bodega owner downstairs recognized your description. They had searched for her. They had literally tracked her down. The pebble she had dropped had not sunk into oblivion. It had been found, held up to the light. The knock at the door had not been trouble. It had been an answer. Dr. Pendleton looked from his son's grateful face back to Maria's confused one. "Ms. Maria," he said, his tone now deliberate, filled with a purpose that was about to shatter her world. "May we come in? There's something very important I need to discuss with you." Maria stood frozen for a second, her mind reeling. The damp from the hallway seemed to seep into the room, but it was the intensity in Dr. Pendleton's eyes that sent a chill down her spine. "SSI, of course. Please come in." "Forgive it is small," she stammered, stepping aside, her movements awkward. She felt exposed, her entire life laid bare in this single room. Leo hobbled in first, maneuvering his crutches with practiced difficulty, his cast making a soft thump on the worn linoleum. Dr. Pendleton followed, his presence seeming to fill the small space, his expensive coat a stark contrast to her second-hand sofa. "Please sit," Maria said, gesturing weakly towards the sofa. She quickly moved a stack of medical journals she was studying to improve her English from the only other chair. Dr. Pendleton sat on the edge of the sofa, his posture erect, while Leo lowered himself carefully beside his father, propping his crutches against the wall. Maria remained standing, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, a defensive gesture. The rain pattered softly against the window, the only sound in the tense silence. Dr. Pendleton's gaze swept the room once more, not with judgment, but with a deep, absorbing empathy. He saw the pride in the cleanliness, the hope in the study materials, the struggle in the bills. His eyes finally settled on the photo of Sophia. "Your daughter?" he asked gently. Maria nodded, her throat tight. "Sophia. She is at university. In Santo Domingo." "She's beautiful," he said. Then he turned his full attention back to Maria. "Leo is my only son, Ms. Maria. When he called me from the ambulance, my world stopped. By the time I got to the hospital, the surgeons were already prepping him. But the first thing he said to me, before he even complained about the pain, was, 'You have to find her, Dad.' The woman with the kind eyes and the steady hands. She saved me." Leo nodded, his own eyes glistening. "They kept saying in the ER how lucky I was that a medical professional was on the scene. They said your actions made all the difference." Maria wrapped her arms tighter around herself. It was nothing. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Dr. Pendleton said, his voice firm, absolute. "They would not have. I have been an emergency room physician for 35 years. I have seen 1,000 scenes like that. Most people freeze. They film. They do not act. You did. You didn't just act, you performed with the skill and calm of a veteran trauma nurse." He leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "When Leo said you were a nurse in the Dominican Republic, a piece of the puzzle clicked into place. But it also raised a question. A nurse of your evident caliber, what are you doing here, working as a home health aide?" The question, asked with such direct yet profound compassion, was the key that unlocked the dam. The story tumbled out of Maria then, in a quiet, emotional torrent. She spoke of the years of study, of her respected position at the hospital in Santiago. She spoke of the painful decision to leave her daughter, her mother, her life, to come here for the chance to earn enough to support them, to give Sophia a future. She told him of the frustrating, expensive and labyrinthine process of having her credentials recognized, of the closed doors, the endless requirements, the feeling of being perpetually stuck in a system that did not see her worth. She spoke of the loneliness, the fear that she had made a terrible mistake, that her skills were withering away, that the proud nurse Hernandez was disappearing, replaced by the invisible Maria. She did not cry, but her voice was thick with a lifetime of suppressed emotion. When she finished, the room was silent again, but the silence was different now. It was charged, respectful, full of understanding. Dr. Pendleton looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he slowly reached into the inner pocket of his impeccably tailored coat. He pulled out not a wallet, but a small, leather-bound folder. He opened it and handed it to her. Maria took it with trembling hands. It was an identification card. Arthur Pendleton, M.D., F.A.C.S. And below his name and photo, his title, Director of Emergency Medicine, St. Catherine's Hospital. 星号. St. Catherine's. One of the largest, most prestigious teaching hospitals in the city. A place she could only dream of walking into as anything more than a patient or a visitor. She looked from the ID to his face, her mind unable to process the connection. "I don't understand," she whispered. Dr. Pendleton's stern expression finally broke into a small, gentle smile. "Maria," he said, and the use of her first name felt like a benediction. "I have spent my career looking for people like you. People who don't run from crisis, but towards it. People with competence and, more importantly, with profound humanity. These are the qualities you cannot teach in medical school." He paused, letting his words sink in through the sound of the rain. "The bureaucratic maze you're stuck in. It's a monster I know well. But it's a monster I have the keys to." He leaned forward, his blue eyes blazing with conviction. "I want to offer you a job. Not as an aide. A job in my emergency department at St. Catherine's. We will start you as a nursing assistant, while we fast-track the equivalency process for your license. My office will handle all the paperwork, the fees, everything. I will personally mentor you. Within a year, I am confident you will be Nurse Hernandez again, working where you belong." Maria's legs gave way. She sank into the chair behind her, the leather ID folder feeling impossibly heavy in her hand. The room seemed to tilt. The rain, the tiny apartment, the pile of bills, it all blurred into a meaningless background haze. All that existed was the face of this man, this stranger, this answered prayer, and the impossible, glorious, life-altering words he had just spoken. The sound of the rain was now a gentle hum, a soothing soundtrack to the seismic shift happening in the small room. Maria stared at Dr. Pendleton, her mouth slightly agape, the leather folder a solid, real weight in her hand. The words echoed in her mind, but they were too big, too bright to comprehend. A job. At St. Catherine's. In the emergency department. It was the destination she had been trying to reach for 5 months, the shining city on a hill that had remained perpetually out of reach, shrouded in fog. And this man was offering her a map and a guide. I, she stammered, her English failing her. "No puede ser. It can't be." Dr. Pendleton's smile deepened, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "It can be, Maria. It will be. Consider it a down payment on a debt I can never fully repay. You gave me my son. Let me help you get your life back." Leo watched the exchange, a look of profound satisfaction on his pale face. "Please say yes," he said, his voice earnest. "Let him do this. He's stubborn when he wants to be." Maria looked from father to son. She saw the absolute sincerity in their eyes. This was not pity. This was respect. This was a professional recognizing another professional. This was gratitude manifesting as the most profound opportunity imaginable. A single hot tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. Then another. She didn't sob. She simply sat there as the tears fell, a silent release of 5 months of fear, of loneliness, of deferred dreams. She was not crying from sadness, but from the overwhelming, terrifying, beautiful force of hope. It was a hope so sharp it was almost painful. "Your credentials," Dr. Pendleton continued, his tone becoming practical, pulling her back from the emotional precipice. "I'll need copies of everything. Diplomas, transcripts, licenses from the DR. My administrative team is excellent. They've navigated the international credentialing process many times. They will be your advocates." Maria finally found her voice, though it was thick with emotion. "But, the cost. The exams, the applications, it is thousands of dollars." Dr. Pendleton waved a dismissive hand. "An investment. In you. And one St. Catherine's is happy to make as part of our recruitment program. Consider it a signing bonus." A signing bonus. The phrase was so alien, so corporate, so utterly different from the world of scraping by that it almost made her laugh. The absurdity of it all, the crutches leaning against her wall, the distinguished doctor on her old sofa, the offer that was unraveling the very fabric of her difficult reality, was overwhelming. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had held pressure on Leo's wound, that had wiped Mr. Henderson's brow, that had scrubbed floors and counted pennies. They were capable hands. She had always known that. But for the first time in a long time, someone else of immense importance saw it too. "I do not know what to say," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Say yes, Maria," Dr. Pendleton said softly. She looked up, meeting his gaze. She saw the brilliant physician, the powerful director. But in that moment, she also saw just a father, immensely grateful to the woman who had kept his family whole. She saw an ally. She saw a door swinging open onto a future she had almost stopped daring to imagine. She took a deep, shuddering breath, the kind that fills your lungs after being underwater for too long. She straightened her spine, the posture of Nurse Hernandez returning as if it had never left. She looked Dr. Arthur Pendleton directly in the eye, her own gaze now clear, steady, and filled with a fierce, rekindled light. "Yes," she said. The word was simple, quiet, but in the small, rain-streaked apartment, it sounded like a thunderclap. "Yes, Dr. Pendleton. Thank you. I accept." The practicalities that followed her single, earth-shattering yes felt like a beautiful, frantic dream. Dr. Pendleton, ever the efficient leader, was already in motion. He took out his phone, a sleek, modern device that seemed to hold the power to reshape destinies. "Janice, it's Arthur. I need you to clear my schedule for the next 2 hours. No, something more important. I'm emailing you a name, Maria Hernandez." He spelled it out carefully. "She is a highly skilled RN from the Dominican Republic. I'm bringing her on board for the ED. I want you to initiate the fast-track international credentialing process immediately. Yes, full sponsorship. And draw up a contract for a nursing assistant position, effective next Monday, with a path to RN upon licensure. Top of the pay band." Maria listened, her heart hammering a new, excited rhythm. Top of the pay band. The words were music. It meant she could pay her rent without fear. It meant she could send more money to Sophia. It meant she could maybe, finally breathe. While he was on the phone, Leo smiled at her. "He's in his element," he whispered. "He loves a good project, especially when it involves sticking it to bureaucracy." Maria managed a shaky smile in return. Dr. Pendleton hung up and turned back to her. "Right. First things first. Do you have a computer? Internet access?" Maria shook her head, a flush of embarrassment returning. It was an expense she couldn't justify. "No matter," he said, unfazed. "Janice will email you the documents. There's a public library 2 blocks from here. Use their computers. Scan and email her your documents today. Can you do that?" Yes, I can do that," Maria said, her voice gaining strength. The task was concrete, a first step on a new path. "Good." Dr. Pendleton then did something that surprised her. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a checkbook. He wrote with a quick, fluid hand, tore out the check and handed it to her. It wasn't a grandiose, life-changing sum, but it was enough. Enough for a new, professional wardrobe, for groceries without worry, for a month's rent and then some. It was an advance. A gesture of good faith that dissolved the last vestiges of her doubt. "I cannot," she began, but he cut her off. "You can and you will. Consider it a uniform allowance. You can't start at St. Catherine's in that," he said, gently nodding toward her simple dress. "You need scrubs. Good ones." He stood up, and Leo struggled to his feet with his crutches. "We've taken enough of your morning. You have work to do." He handed her a crisp, white business card. "My personal cell number is on the back. Any problems, any questions, any time. You call me." Maria stood too, holding the check and the business card, 2 pieces of paper that felt like tickets to a new world. She walked them to the door, her legs steady now. As Dr. Pendleton stepped out into the rainy hallway, he turned back one last time. "Welcome to the team, Nurse Hernandez," he said, and the title, spoken with such respect, was the greatest gift of all. Then they were gone, their footsteps echoing down the stairs. Maria closed the door slowly, leaning her back against it. She looked around her apartment. Nothing had changed. The same worn furniture, the same chipped mug in the sink, the same pile of bills on the table. But everything had changed. The gray light from the window seemed brighter now, the rain a symbol of washing clean, of renewal. She looked at the check in her hand, at the elegant script of Arthur Pendleton. She looked at the business card, a tangible lifeline. She walked to the window and watched as the silver-haired doctor helped his son into a waiting car downstairs. She didn't feel like the invisible woman anymore. She felt seen. She felt valued. She felt the first, fragile thread of a new life being woven, a thread spun from her own competence and kindness, now being pulled taut by the hand of fate. The weight was gone, replaced by a thrilling, terrifying, and magnificent sense of anticipation. The hours after Dr. Pendleton and Leo left were a blur of purposeful activity. Maria moved through her small apartment with an energy she hadn't felt in months. The first thing she did was carefully place the check and the business card inside her passport, tucking them away for safekeeping. Then, she gathered every document she possessed. Her nursing diploma from the Universidad Autónoma de Santo Domingo, her transcripts, her professional license from the Dominican Colegio de Enfermeras, her work certificates from the hospital in Santiago. She arranged them neatly in a folder, her hands trembling not with fear, but with excitement. She changed out of her house dress into her best pair of jeans and a clean blouse, a sense of occasion animating her every move. The rain had lightened to a drizzle as she walked the 2 blocks to the public library, the folder clutched tightly to her chest like a sacred text. The library was a haven of quiet warmth. She found an available computer and, with some difficulty, created an email account. She typed Janice's email address carefully, her fingers clumsy on the keyboard. She wrote a short, formal message, introducing herself and stating that Dr. Pendleton had instructed her to send her documents. Then, she painstakingly scanned each page at the library's machine, watching as her past, her qualifications, her very identity were digitized and sent flying through the air to a woman named Janice in an office at St. Catherine's Hospital. With each click of the send button, she felt a piece of her old self being restored. When the last document was sent, she sat back in the hard plastic chair, a profound sense of relief washing over her. It was done. The first step. The machine, once immovable, was now in motion, and it was being oiled by one of the most powerful men in New York medicine. She walked home feeling lighter, as if she were floating a few inches above the wet pavement. The city, once a place of intimidating noise and indifference, now seemed full of possibility. The honking cars were a symphony of ambition, the towering buildings were monuments to achievement, the rushing people were all chasing their own dreams, just like her. Back in her apartment, she couldn't sit still. She cleaned, not out of necessity, but out of a surplus of energy. She hummed an old merengue tune her mother used to sing. She picked up the photo of Sophia. "Mija," she whispered, her voice brimming with emotion. "Something incredible has happened. Your mommy is going to be a nurse again." She knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be challenging exams, a steep learning curve in a world-class American ER, moments of doubt and insecurity. But for the first time, the challenge felt exhilarating instead of exhausting. She was not facing it alone. She had an ally. She had a path. That afternoon, she went to her shift at Mr. Henderson's with a new lightness in her heart. She found herself chatting to him more than usual, telling him about the vibrant colors of the jacaranda trees in Santiago during the spring. He listened, a faint smile on his lips, as if he could sense the change in her. "You seem different today, Maria," he remarked as she was leaving. "There's a light in your eyes that wasn't there before." She smiled, a genuine, effortless smile that reached her eyes. "It is a good day, Mr. Henderson. A very good day." That night, she lay in bed, but sleep was slow to come. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, of hospital corridors, of stethoscopes, of the controlled chaos of an emergency room. She thought of Dr. Pendleton's confident voice, of Leo's grateful eyes. She thought of the simple, split-second decision to run towards a crisis instead of away from it. That single act of instinctual kindness had been a key, unlocking a door she had been pounding on for months. It was a testament to the invisible threads that connect us, threads of compassion and humanity that, when pulled, can unravel the most tangled of knots. She stared at the ceiling, the city's eternal orange glow painting patterns on the plaster. The quiet of the night was no longer lonely. It was the quiet before the storm, the wonderful, chaotic, beautiful storm of her new beginning. And for the first time since she'd arrived in this country, Maria Hernandez was not afraid of the rain. The following day was Sunday, a day that usually stretched before Maria, long and empty. But this Sunday was different. This Sunday was for transformation. With the advance from Dr. Pendleton safely in her bank account, she allowed herself a luxury she hadn't known in years. A day dedicated entirely to herself and her future. She took the subway into Manhattan, not as a weary commuter, but as an explorer. She got off near a large department store, its windows gleaming with displays of mannequins in crisp, professional attire. Walking through the automatic doors felt like crossing a threshold. The air smelled of perfume and new fabric. For over an hour, she moved through the women's section, her fingers tracing the material of blouses, the sturdy cotton of high-quality scrubs. She selected 2 sets of scrubs in a deep royal blue, the color of the St. Catherine's nursing staff. She held them up, imagining herself wearing them, a stethoscope around her neck, moving with purpose through a busy ward. She also bought a pair of comfortable, supportive nursing shoes, the kind she knew were essential for surviving 12-hour shifts on her feet. It was an investment in her body, in her endurance. She tried on a simple, elegant blazer, turning side to side in the mirror. The woman who looked back was not the tired, defeated immigrant of the week before. She was professional. She was capable. She was Nurse Hernandez. She bought the blazer. Carrying her bags, she felt a surge of pride with every step. This wasn't just shopping, it was an act of self-reclamation. She was assembling the uniform of her resurrected career. Later, she treated herself to lunch at a small Puerto Rican restaurant, savoring a meal she didn't have to cook, the flavors of the Caribbean a comforting embrace amidst the steel and glass of the city. She sat by the window, watching the world go by, and she planned. She would go to the library tomorrow and print out study guides for the NCLEX exam, the final hurdle for her nursing license. She would review anatomy and pharmacology. She would be ready. When she returned to her apartment in the Bronx, the sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows. She hung her new scrubs and blazer in her small closet, the vibrant blue a splash of color amidst her muted, everyday clothes. They were a promise, hanging there in the semi-darkness. That evening, she called her daughter. "Sophia Mija," she said when she heard her voice, the connection crackling with the distance of 1,000 miles. "I have news." She told her the whole story, from the screech of the tires to the knock on the door, from Dr. Pendleton's revelation to the new scrubs hanging in her closet. She spoke in rapid, joyful Spanish, the words tumbling over each other. On the other end of the line, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a sob of pure happiness. "Mami, lo sabía. I knew it. I knew they would see how amazing you are." Sophia cried. They talked for an hour, dreaming together about the future. For the first time, the future felt close, tangible, bright. After she hung up, Maria felt a connection to her daughter that was stronger than the physical distance between them. She was no longer just a mother who had sacrificed. She was a role model showing her daughter that kindness and perseverance could indeed move mountains. She stood at her window again, looking out at the glittering tapestry of lights that was the Bronx at night. The 4 train rumbled by, but the sound was no longer a symbol of her struggle. It was the sound of the city's heartbeat, a rhythm she was now joining with a new sense of belonging. Her journey was far from over, but the path was clear. The difficult beginning was behind her. The transformative middle was now. She was ready for her new life. She was ready to heal, and in doing so to be healed. Monday morning arrived not with a sense of dread, but with the electric buzz of anticipation. Maria awoke before her alarm, her body humming with nervous energy. The morning ritual was the same, the café con leche, the glance out the window, but every action was infused with a new meaning. Today, she was not just Maria the immigrant. She was Maria the nursing assistant, St. Catherine's Hospital. She dressed carefully in her new royal blue scrubs. The fabric felt sturdy and professional against her skin. She laced up her new, supportive shoes. She looked in the mirror and took a deep breath. The woman staring back was a fusion of her past and her future. The resilient spirit of Santiago, and the determined professional of New York. She grabbed her purse, now holding a notebook and pen for her first day, and left her apartment. The walk to the subway felt different. She walked with a confident stride, her head held high. People seemed to see her differently, or perhaps she was just seeing herself differently. She was no longer invisible. She was a healthcare worker, part of the army that kept the city healthy. The train ride was a meditation. She closed her eyes, visualizing the hospital, steadying her nerves. She thought of Dr. Pendleton's promise. "I will personally mentor you." She was not walking into this alone. St. Catherine's Hospital was a massive, imposing complex of glass and steel, a city within a city. As she walked through the automatic doors into the bustling main lobby, the scale of it was momentarily overwhelming. The air smelled of antiseptic and floor wax, a universal hospital scent that, for her, smelled like coming home. She went to the administration office, where an efficient, friendly woman named Janice was waiting for her. "Maria, we've been expecting you. Dr. Pendleton has spoken very highly of you," Janice said, handing her a stack of paperwork and a temporary ID badge. Maria clipped the badge to her scrubs. It had her name and her photo. Maria Hernandez, nursing assistant. She stared at it, her throat tight. It was real. Janice gave her a quick tour, then escorted her to the emergency department. The ED was a controlled chaos of beeping monitors, hurried conversations, and the constant motion of doctors, nurses, and technicians. It was exactly as she had imagined, yet more intense, more vibrant, more alive. And then she saw him. Dr. Pendleton was at the central nurses' station, reviewing a chart with a resident. He looked up, as if sensing her arrival. His stern face broke into a warm, welcoming smile. He excused himself and walked over to her. "Nurse Hernandez. Welcome to the ER," he said, his voice cutting easily through the din. He didn't treat her like a novice or a charity case. He spoke to her as a colleague. "Ready for your first day?" Maria looked around at the humming epicenter of medicine, at the patients behind curtains, at the team working with focused intensity. She felt a familiar calm settle over her, the same calm that had descended on her when she knelt beside Leo on the pavement. This was where she was meant to be. She met his gaze, her own eyes clear and steady. "Yes, doctor," she said, her voice firm and sure. "I am ready." Dr. Pendleton nodded, a look of deep satisfaction in his eyes. He gestured towards the busy floor. "Then let's get to work." Maria took her first step into the fray, into the noise and the need, into the purpose she had crossed an ocean to find. The story that began with an act of kindness on a cold street had found its way here, to this room where lives were saved and futures were rebuilt, including her own. She was home.